Well, the win streak is over for the St. Louis Cardinals, but after an offensive eruption for a comeback win in Game 2 on Wednesday, is the momentum still going strong? We'll talk about it coming up on B-Schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Thursday morning, May 15th, 2025. I got good news and I got bad news. Start with the bad news. Win streak's over. Good news, perhaps another one has already begun. As the Cardinals wrapped up their series with the Phillies on Wednesday with the split doubleheader, Game 1 didn't go their way. Really well-pitched ball game. 2-1, the Cardinals fall to the Phillies. We'll talk about that game. Break down the margins. They were slim, and the Cardinals just couldn't quite get enough key plays to get the win. But, folks, all's well that ends well, right? The Cardinals still win this Phillies series, and they do so in pretty impressive fashion. Couple of touchdowns, and, well, the Philadelphia Phillies? Oh, yeah, it's the Phillies. Only scored one touchdown. 14-7, Cardinals win Game 2 as they did not get good sunny. It's not always sunny in Philadelphia, apparently, because he was just not on his game. But the Cardinal bats came to play and secured a series win. A road series win over the Phillies, I would still count as a pretty significant accomplishment, and one that maybe even after a disappointing loss in the first game of that doubleheader, restores the momentum for the direction the Cardinals have been heading in, and they're still heading in, potentially as we sit here on this off day Thursday. And then the Cardinals will wrap up the road trip with one more tough series in Kansas City. And you might say, well, Brenden, the Royals. I mean, come on, that's the Royals. No, not your older brother's Royals. They're 25-20. They've got a winning record, and they have been dynamite at home. 16-7, the home record for Kansas City. Nobody but the Tigers in the American League has as many home wins as the Royals do, and only the Mets, Dodgers, and Padres among National League teams are in that category as well. The Mets have 17, Dodgers and Padres both with 16. Royals are 16-7 at home. So this is not going to be a cakewalk of a series. We'll spend a little bit more time previewing that series when we get into the next episode. It'll be Thursday night or Friday morning. This is a morning episode of B-Schaeff Daily because last night in St. Louis, my wife and I went to the Saint Motel concert. That was at the Hawthorne on Washington Avenue, which is pretty close to the soccer stadium. And as we're driving down there, it's, kind of off to the side, this music venue, where I wasn't expecting to have any difficulty parking. And I start to see soccer fans walking around. I'm like, I thought the soccer team wasn't very good this year. Why is everybody going to this soccer game? And apparently they were playing Kansas City, and parking was a nightmare. But anyway, it was cool. We were walking by the soccer stadium from a couple of blocks away and could hear, the noise. And I've never been to a soccer game yet, and I have never been even around the stadium while one was going on. So that was kind of neat. But anyway, the concert was great. It meant that we had to wait until this morning to do this episode of the show. And it was kind of wild. So I was locked in on the entire first game. 2-1 Cardinals loss. We'll talk about a couple of interesting spots in that game. We'll talk about the eighth inning where really the game was lost for the Cardinals in Game 1. But I did the post-game show with Joe Roderick for Sports Hub STL. And then Game 2, we're driving to a restaurant before the concert. And the Cardinals, of course, down 5-1. Sonny Gray gets beat pretty hard in that first inning. And so I thought, oh, that's no good. And then as we walk into the restaurant, I look up at the TV screen that's on there. And, I had to do a legit double take. 6-5 Cardinals. I'm like, what the hell happened? Are we watching the same game? The Cardinals rally almost immediately to reclaim the lead in a game that was decidedly very drunk from then on, as the Cardinals just continued to tack on runs. Not the score you would expect for a game between Sonny Gray and Aaron Nola, but that's the score you got. 14-7 Cardinals. So We'll talk about that, but let's start at the beginning with the Cardinals lost in game one, 2-1. This really felt like the second game in a row with a playoff atmosphere and just tight, well-pitched, well-played game. That style of play that you often see in the playoffs where you're just waiting for one team to blink and you figure out based on the reaction to that who's going to win the game. Cardinals get their lone run all the way in the seventh inning. It took until the Cardinals were able to score. Again, really well-pitched game. Eric Fetty had a nice outing for St. Louis, and Luzardo was on his game for Philly. But the Cardinals got to Luzardo in that seventh inning, and it was Jordan Walker coming up with the lone RBI swing of the game for the Cardinals. Really good to see from him. You would love to think that Jordan Walker might be able to get things going, and that moment could be something that catapults him. We'll see. Of course, later in the game, he was pinch hit for in the ninth inning and did not start in game two, so any momentum that would follow from that swing is going to have to wait till the weekend in Kansas City. But it was nice to see from Jordan Walker nevertheless. In a game where the Cardinals were struggling to come up with anything against a really good opposing starter, it was Jordan Walker with a 2-out RBI, and we'll see where it goes from there. His numbers aren't great on the season, as we know. He's 1 for 3 yesterday with that RBI swing to improve his average to 184 and his OPS to 502, which is, it's rough for sure. It's been rough for Gorman as well, who pinch hit in the ninth inning of game one yesterday. He struck out in that spot, but did have a little more to say about it when he started in game two and got on base a couple of times. But we'll see for those guys. It'll continue to be a storyline of the season for the Cardinals, what happens with Walker and Gorman and whether either of them can grab hold and take advantage of this opportunities that they're continuing to be given for the time being. But let's talk about a couple of things. I want to start in the sixth inning. And I know this didn't come back to end up really mattering significantly in the game because the Cardinals obviously lost. But I thought it was very interesting that Eric Fetty was in there for the sixth and was starting to get into a spot of trouble. And I just thought it was compelling how Ollie Marmol handled it because we have seen him at times be really aggressive when the matchups dictate it's time to take your starter out and go with somebody else. That's mostly been a Miles Mikolas thing when it's a case where you ignore pitch count. It's the situation that dictates. And I thought there was a similar one coming up for Eric Fetty in the sixth. Pitch count was fine. But I felt like I was at least surprised that they had him face Bryce Harper in that sixth inning. Because the numbers for Bryce Harper against Eric Fetty, career-wise, were kind of jarring. I'm looking these up now the next day, so I assume it includes yesterday's numbers. Harper 12 for 24 with 2 doubles, 6 homers, 6 walks against Eric Fetty. So he's hitting .500. 8 extra base hits in 24 at-bats, a slug of 1333. His OPS nearly 2,000. So, again, he added to that yesterday with a double and a walk. But I was just really surprised because of those numbers coming in. Pitch count, whatever, I thought, okay, this will be a spot to go to the bullpen. Now, in Ollie Marmol's defense, I think he handled it correctly. But we always think through these things as they're happening. And I try not to do the second-guessing thing. I try to think about it as it's coming up, and then I'll be intellectually honest about whatever I thought in the moment. And I thought, I don't know about that, facing Bryce Harper. Those numbers are rough. There's no world in which he gets Bryce Harper out. As he's wearing down third time through, he got Bryce Harper out the first time he faced him in the game, but only because Bryce Harper hit it too high. It was a 42-degree launch angle, I think 107 miles per hour exit velocity off the bat, and it ballpark barely contained it. I thought for sure it was going to be a homer. A lot of people probably did too. So I thought it was an interesting spot. Trey Turner had already walked. You're in a situation where it's still 0-0. Cardinals haven't scored, so you don't have a lot of proof of concept here that they're going to score off of Luzardo. If the Cardinals are up 2-0 or even 1-0, I think that maybe the situation gets handled a little bit differently. I can't say for sure. I wasn't there covering to be able to ask about it. But when you haven't scored a run yet, it's hard to throw the kitchen sink of your bullpen at things in the sixth inning without any outs in the sixth inning of game one of a doubleheader. And this is why it's so interesting, because had Ollie Marmol done it differently, does game 2 go differently, right? Because they end up having to pull Sonny Gray pretty early, and it makes sense to do so because he didn't have it, and the Cardinals' bats were giving you a chance to win that second game, so you had to go to your bullpen. You had to get Sonny out of there. You could make the case that Ollie probably should have done it even a little bit sooner, but I also understand there were moments where he'd give up a homer to Schwarber, and then he'd strike out a couple of guys and look better, and so you'd want to try to ride with him. It was just a very weird game for Sonny in game 2. But with all that in mind, Eric Fetty does face Harper. At some point in that at-bat, you have Trey Turner stealing second base, and so you're like, all right, let's maybe be careful with Harper. I don't know if that was part of the equation, but it's what happens. He ends up walking Harper, and it's on 4 pitches. None of the pitches are particularly close. So this is where it's just like really good. This felt like playoff baseball to me, because Fetty stays in there for Schwarber, stays in there for Castellanos, and gets both of them to pop out before Steven Matz comes in to strike out Max Kepler to get out of that jam in the 6th inning. And then Steven Matz is able to get you through and pitch that next inning. Now, it didn't go his way. Ends up getting tagged with the loss in this game after giving up a couple of runs there in the 7th. But really was kind of a bizarre inning. There's an overturned play at second base where it seemed like the Cardinals had defensively played their way into an out. Jordan Walker on a base hit throws across the third. Arenado cuts the throw a little early to try to go back and get the runner who had been the batter at second base. Tags his helmet instead of his person, and the helmet had flown off at that point, so they don't get the out there, even though it seemed like they should have. And then just a tough one for Brendan Donovan. He couldn't quite come up with a ground ball at second base. Infield playing in. I don't love the infield in historically, but I understand it. It allows this inning to get a little bit more sticky, though, because of the infield in, and Donovan was not in a spot to be able to field that ground ball cleanly. 1 run would have scored probably had they done it differently. You're conceding that run, which they don't want to ever do. I understand it. But what it means is that there's still 1 out, and you've got a lot of mess to clean up yet. They get the second out of the inning, and the third one comes at home plate, but not before Bryce Harper gets a base hit to score the go-ahead run. The play at the plate was challenged by the Phillies as well, even though Pedro Pages has to go 6 or 8 or 10 feet up the line to catch the ball and then make the tag, staying in there, not remotely close to home plate. I thought if they overturn that one, you got to be kidding me. But they didn't. But the Cardinals couldn't find any more momentum offensively in the 8th and 9th against Alvarado and then Jordan Romano. Now, the 8th was the moment where I think the Cardinals had their best chance to do some damage and win this game. You get leadoff single by Newt and a walk by Masyn Winn. It's first and second, nobody out, and it's Brendan Donovan at the plate. The decision is to have him try to bunt to move the 2 runners over, to get you second and third with 1 out, and Arenado and Contreras would be the 2 shots you have to score and run at that point. He fails to bunt, but ultimately ends up having the same result as a bunt would have been because he grounds out to the right side and moves the 2 runners over. My opinion on this is never bunt. I'm not a fan of a bunt in this spot with your number 3 hitter. I know he's been struggling, but I just do not see taking the bat out of Donovan's hands, conceding an out when the pitcher just gave you 2 base runners. He gave up a hit, and then he walked a guy, so he's not in command of the strike zone right now. You come out there showing bunt, giving away a strike, first of all, because he doesn't get the bunt down. If he gets it down, you give away an out. He doesn't get it down, you give away a strike, which changes the complete dynamic of what Alvarado can do on the mound. Now suddenly, Brendan Donovan, who has not been swinging it well, when he doesn't succeed with the bunt, which is unlikely to be successful anyway because the guy throws 99 with movement, and Donovan is not a guy who bunts. You don't ask him to bunt very often in his career. If he's swinging away, he's got good bat control. He's not a guy who strikes out a ton. I know he's kind of going through it in recent days. But now you've basically put Donovan behind the 8 ball once he fails to bunt on the first pitch. Now he's 0-1. And when it's 99 at the knees for strike 2, he could swing at that, but he's he's already in kind of defensive mode and he's not comfortable at the plate. So you're almost handicapping him in the at-bat at that point to where the best result might be a right side ground out, and that's still conceding an out. So I don't really agree with it. It's one of those things where I think is a close call. I don't think it makes Ollie Marmol a complete idiot to do it. I think it's really compelling baseball conversation. My personal opinion is not to generally bunt to give away outs in a spot where a crooked number is what you need anyway to go ahead in the game. And sure, you're one out, you're second and third. Like, they got the result they wanted, right? The bunt didn't happen, but it essentially was the same outcome because you're second, third, one out. Okay, this is the situation you wanted. Here's why it doesn't work out, because you got to have it from Arenado, and if you don't, any which way of getting Wilson Contreras out will be sufficient, right? It's the last batter at that point. There's 2 outs in the inning, so you have one guy who can hit a sacrifice fly and tie the game. Otherwise, you're down to your last dude. Arenado pops out. Contreras, you got to swing the bat. Contreras has been so good recently, but that was not a spot that you love to see from him with the strikeout looking. And the Cardinals' threat is over. The Cardinals basically, by bunting and conceding an out there, which again, they didn't successfully bunt, but they tried to, and they had the same result as if they had successfully bunted. So we got a chance to see it play out the way it would have had he bunted successfully. It's a spot where the Cardinals basically are conceding the out, and they are giving to Philadelphia, like drawing for them the blueprint of how they're going to get out of this jam. Because rather than having just a chaotic situation where potentially Brendan Donovan might tie the game himself with a hit, but instead you're saying, no, we're going to wait for the next guy to do it, and we're going to give Philadelphia one fewer landmine to navigate around. Just my opinion. Let me know in the comments here what you guys think. A lot of people love the bunt. A lot of people say they should have bunted 3 times and made sure you got it down. I don't love giving up an out like that with my number 3 hitter. I don't care how he's been swinging it recently. That's just not for me. Just my opinion. So let me know in the comments if you agree, disagree with how that one played out. Obviously, you want to see Arenado come through, but he didn't. And again, that's part of the reason that I don't concede the out is to give yourself more chances to do it. Because a base hit from Donovan ties the game in the same way that Arenado's base hit gives you the go-ahead run. I totally understand that. But you're also saying, well, if Arenado gets a sacrifice fly, now it's a run and you tie the game. Well, sure, you tie the game. Arenado could tie the game with a hit. Donovan could tie the game with a hit. I'd rather have 2 chances at that and then still have Contreras waiting in the wings. Understanding that a hit for Arenado or Contreras is what puts you ahead, just play it straight up. That's just my thought. But you know what? Cardinals lose game 1, and then they come right back in game 2, and they show some resilience as well. Sonny Gray gets firebombed in the first inning, gives up a 5 spot. Cardinals scored in the first inning as well. I mean, nicely done to start this game off with a run. You feel like things are moving in a positive direction. Next thing you know, it's 5-1. The Cardinals are trailing. Sonny gives up a homer. He gives up several hits. He walks guys. Just not his inning, not his night. But the third inning, the Cardinals come back, and they have something to say about it. You get a home run from Nootbaar, a double from Donovan, and Alec Burleson homers. I have to get into a conversation about how much Alec Burleson needs to be playing moving forward because he was swinging a hot bat before the last handful of days, 2-3 days, where he wasn't really playing as much. And then he gets his first opportunity again back in the starting lineup, and he homers and has a big game for the Cardinals. So I'm curious to see how that's going to play out. Like between Burleson and Gorman, for the time being, I'm just ready to see more Burleson. Burleson ended up going 3 for 5 in the game, 4 runs driven in. And, of course, he had the key home run there to help the Cardinals get things back to the equilibrium there in the third inning. Bottom of the third inning, Sonny's still in the game. He gives up a home run to Schwarber. That makes it tied at 6-6. And you're thinking, all right, you're in the game, but this game is certainly drunk. Like there's nothing normal going to happen in this night game is sort of the way that it felt at that point. But the fourth inning comes. The Cardinals are still swinging it well against Aaron Nola. Masyn Winn with a home run to make it 7-6. He loves him a high fastball, doesn't he? 93 at the top of the zone, and Masyn Winn turns on it and cranks it out of there for a home run. Alec Burleson, after they get some men on base for him, Arenado, Contreras, and Herrera singling to set things up. Burleson with a key line drive up the middle to score a couple more runs. And the Cardinals run into the third out there with Ivan Herrera, but make it 9-6, and now you really feel like you're in a great spot. Alec Bohm homers, that's what I'm thinking. All right, Definitely got to get Sonny Gray out. Always started to think the same way. A few batters later, we see John King come into the game to face Bryce Harper, and he gets him out. From there, things do settle down a little bit. The Cardinals end up not giving up another run. King, an inning of work. Roycroft comes in. Romero with a scoreless inning. Masyn and Swanson ends up being able to finish this game as the Cardinals put up some more runs. You thought maybe you'd see Helsley in the latter stages of this one, but ultimately didn't need him as the Cardinals put up 3 more runs in the 8th, and they get a couple more in the 9th to win it 14-7. Absolutely fine in a doubleheader to cap it off with Matt Swanson, who goes right back to Memphis. He was the 27th man for this one, and you don't burn up any of your other relievers. You used a lot of guys in that game and really in that day between the two games, and it all's well that ends well. And didn't need Helsley, which you could say, like, well, what about, getting Ryan Helsley a look, getting him a touch because they don't play Thursday and you don't want him to go too long without pitching. It's not at all to that point for me. And I know on the Sports Hub STL postgame, if you're listening to that, Joe Roderick was texting back and forth with me, and he's like, why are they pitching Helsley? I'm like, dude, Ryan Helsley might not be on this team on August 1st. And if he's not, it's because the Cardinals got a haul for him. You have to keep him healthy. Any day he doesn't pitch is a day he's not going to get hurt. I know that that's a backwards way to think about it, but that sort of has to be almost as big of a priority, if not more, than, making sure he's pitching regularly to keep him sharp. You want him to be sharp. He looked really sharp, but he also pitched on Monday when he looked really sharp. Yesterday was Wednesday. That's just one day off. You're not to the territory where you're like, oh, we need to get him a look. And obviously Thursday is going to be a day off as well. So he'll have gone Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday without pitching. Hopefully Friday night's a 3-2 game and you're feeling good about bringing Ryan Helsley in after he's been well rested. You could pitch him yesterday. You didn't need to, though. But then what happens when you do need him Friday and you use him, but the rest of that weekend he's down because you go, well, he's pitched 3 of the past 5 days. Like, there's just no need to bring Helsley into that spot. I understand Joe was not the only person asking me about that. I had Brock on Twitter asking me about it. I'm not making fun of anybody for asking the question. I'm making fun of Joe because it's funny. But I just do not see that as a spot where you're compelled to force Helsley into that situation, especially when he pitched 2 days previously, right? So for me, that was kind of an easy one. I understand people may have had different feelings about it. But I would say going through that doubleheader and losing a tough one the way you did in Game 1, I mean, if you get a base hit from Nolan Arenado and you win that game 3-2, you probably do use Helsley, though, in that. So it would end up a little bit of a different situation for who you pitch in Game 2. Helsley, Masyn maybe pitches the bottom of the 8th in Game 1. Who knows? Nevertheless, I mean, they were close to having this winning streak continue and be talking about a sweep of the Phillies. To win 2 of 3 at their place under the circumstances where you did have a day that you expected to be playing and it didn't end up happening, you play a doubleheader. It's never easy. Both teams have the same circumstances, but you're playing on the road in that doubleheader. To have Game 1 go the way that it did, where you lose it in pretty disappointing fashion. Like, I'm not saying there was a bunch to just be irate about in Game 1. You don't like that they didn't come through in the clutch 8th inning situation. But it's just one of those games where the Phillies were a little bit better, and so they deserved the win. You're coming off 9 in a row. It happens. I don't think anybody was necessarily down in the dumps about that game. But to come back right away when you don't get good starting pitching for the first time in a couple of weeks and still win that game and win it handily, I think that's a big deal. I think that says a lot about where the Cardinals are. A couple more things I want to mention. As it pertains to that Fedde spot in Game 1, you might have said, well, Brenden, you were pretty specific in saying you wouldn't have necessarily trusted Eric Fedde to stick through that Harper spot. What would you have done differently? That's what I maybe failed to talk about the first time I was discussing the topic. At first, I thought Steven Matz, you should get a lefty in there against Harper, and then he'd be in there for Schwarber. But reality is that, first of all, he ended up facing Harper and gave up a hit against him, but that was an inning later. So I'm not going to say that dictates what Matz would have done in that first spot if he was fresh coming into the game against Harper in the 6th. I think that would have been a fine way to go about it. Harper, though, has done really well against lefties recently. Schwarber has done surprisingly well against lefties, to where maybe that's not the matchup advantage that you would have thought that it would be. And another route you could go is like, okay, Kyle Leahy gets everybody out, just pitch Leahy. But he threw a lot on Monday. Threw in 3 separate innings, I think 46 pitches. If they were going to use Leahy yesterday, which they didn't end up having to do, which I think is fantastic. If they were going to use him, it needed to be for a really specific spot in a game that you feel like you're trying to go out there to save it, not to still try to make it happen. And when it's 0-0 score, you're trying to make it happen. So that was where I was getting to when I said if it's 2-0, if it's 1-0, maybe you go hyper-aggressive and you bring Leahy in for 2 batters in the 6th. But that's probably all you get from him all day. You're not going to throw him in the second game, and I don't think you're going to have Leahy do an up-down 2 days after throwing nearly 50 pitches and doing an up-down, up-down, up. So that's kind of where I was. I was thinking, well, Leahy would be interesting, but I would also understand if the Cardinals are trying to save him. If they do use him, if they have to use him, it's a case where they're doing it to save a game, to like save a winning effort. Whereas when it's 0-0, you don't know that it's a winning effort yet. So what they do is they're careful with Harper and they trust Fedde to get a couple of key outs before they bring in the bullpen arm, Steven Matz, to face a lefty Kepler. And it works out. And I wanted to give Fedde, I didn't really do enough of it, but I wanted to give him some real credit for the way he finished out that outing, because I think it helps set up the rest of the day for the Cardinals. I know they lose game 1, but I thought that was notable, that you're trusting Fedde to get through that spot. It's a little different than Michaelis. They trust him to do it with, look, he doesn't get beat by Bryce Harper. He walks him. But then as a result of being perhaps a little bit careful with Harper there, you have to bear down on the next 2 guys, one of whom is a lefty in Schwarber, and he does it. I thought Fedde was really good yesterday, despite the 4 walks, kind of back to being a problem for him, but maybe a couple of those were strategic. 5 2/3, no runs, 3 hits, 4 walks, only 3 strikeouts, but his ERA now down to 3.44. He's really giving the Cardinals a good chance. Matz, we obviously know what happened with him there in the 6th, got out of it in the rest of the 7th. The 8th inning, I believe he even faced a batter in the 8th inning. And then you had Gordon Graceffo come on for the final couple of outs in the bottom of the 8th, and Graceffo's looked really good. And Graceffo, of course, went to Villanova from the New Jersey area, so kind of semi-local to Philadelphia. Probably had some friends and family in attendance there for that, so that was probably pretty cool for him. But that's what I wanted to get to from game 1, is just give a little bit more credit than I did to Eric Fedde, because I thought that was a notable spot in the game where maybe all he could have done something differently, but stuck with it and told Fedde, hey, we're going to ride you until this point, and it worked out to his favor. And I thought that was a really tightly managed spot, and he put his best foot forward, in my opinion. Now, the other thing I wanted to touch on from the doubleheader, and we will go down on the farm quickly before we get out of here today. Game 2 was the first game we've seen Ivan Herrera back behind the plate catching, and obviously everybody can look and say, well, that's the game that Sonny Gray blew up, so is that a very good idea to have Ivan Herrera back there? My thought on that is this, completely unrelated to the blow-up. Sonny Gray, I mean, he's calling his own game on PitchCom, if I'm not mistaken. So I just don't really see how Herrera being back there, like, if anything, that would be the perfect game to get him back behind the plate to reintegrate, because you can ease him in where he doesn't have to call the pitches for the starter. Now, maybe Sonny Gray should call some different pitches for himself if that's the case, because after he left the game, Herrera stayed in, and the Cardinals didn't give up another run. Herrera stayed behind the plate, and so, you know, there's that for you. So I do not want Herrera. I mean, look, you can do what you want. I don't think Herrera should be blamed for the Sonny Gray blow-up. I think Sonny Gray is a creature of habit, and, you know, right or wrong, he was supposed to pitch in a game at noon on Wednesday, and then at some point that gets changed. I think they moved him to the night game to try to give him more of a normal routine, but you know what? Sometimes it just might be in your head, and it did not work out, decidedly so. That's not making an excuse for Sonny Gray. Like, he needs to be better. He's got to find a way to not have that happen, regardless of, you know, like, you think about a guy like Matthew Liberatore, who last year at times had to pitch on no days rest because of changes to the schedule. I mean, Kyle Gibson, I think, was warming up last year for a game and got injured in the warm-ups, and they're like, we need somebody to throw some innings. Who wants to pitch? And it was Libby had thrown in relief the day before, and he started the game. You know, grinded to his best of his ability. Sonny Gray, I think, is a little bit more particular, and, you know, maybe that was something that played into it today or yesterday. I don't know. but certainly he did not have his good stuff, and he got hit around pretty good. So give up 3 home runs. There were spots where he was sharp. I mean, a couple of the strikeouts he had 4 Ks, but it just was not consistent from Sonny yesterday. I'm not putting that on Herrera remotely, though. That's what I wanted to mention. And now that we can go down on the farm.
It's time to go down on the farm. Brought to you by Hastings Layers Premium Eggs.
You'll be happier than a jackass eating thistle.
Huh?
Things were not particularly happy on the farm yesterday for the Memphis Redbirds. They lose 11-0 to the Nashville Sounds. Ian Bedell, my Mizzou-made guy, struggled, gave up a touchdown in 4 innings. So his ERA is 8.5. Yeah, that's tough. And, of course, the Memphis Redbirds didn't score. So I said we go down on the farm. Maybe we probably shouldn't have. 3 hits in the game, 2 for Fermin, 1 for Torres, and that's all she wrote in the loss for the AAA affiliate. But a little happier to report with the Springfield Cardinals at AA. They win 7-5 over the Amarillo Sod Poodles. We always talk about J.J. Weatherholt. He got on base a couple of times. 1 for 4, also reached base with a walk. How about Chase Davis? He's really started to pick things up. 3 for 3 yesterday. Couple of runs scored. Couple of RBIs, and one of those was a home run for him. He reached base 4 times as well. Had a walk in that game. He's hitting .245 with a .755 OPS. Chase Davis, I definitely think, has a big league future. Just has to continue on the path that he's on. Is really looking like a different player this year, and hopefully he can continue days like yesterday and eventually get that promotion to Memphis and beyond. So keep an eye on Chase Davis and, of course, J.J. Weatherholt for sure from that AA squad. That, though, is going to do it for this edition of the show. Again, I always like to apologize when I don't get a podcast out in the wee hours of the morning for y'all. But with the off day Thursday, I thought there'd be a little bit more time. Folks could listen to this later in the day, or even they could go back and listen Friday morning if they had to for their commute. I'll try to still do a B-Schaeff Daily tonight. Maybe it'll be about that topic of what do you do more with the Gorman Walker stuff with Alec Burleson hitting the way that he's hitting. But do apologize that we had a delay for this one. Hope you enjoyed it, though. I enjoyed the doubleheader. I thought it was really compelling baseball, and hopefully we get more of that from the Cardinals over the weekend. And I'll just let you know in advance over the weekend, my 10-year wedding anniversary with my wife is this weekend, so we'll be a little bit less in work mode. We're going to be going on a trip. I will bring my computer. I'll be able to potentially do some podcast stuff for the weekend, but it will be more sparingly and perhaps less quality because I'm not bringing all my equipment. So understand that if there's a day there's not a podcast this weekend, it's because I don't want the 10th year to be the last year of my marriage, capiche? So appreciate you guys for indulging me with that, and hope everybody enjoys the weekend. It should be a fun one. And if you're heading on over to Kansas City, that should be a good time for the I-70 series. But like I said, Thursday night, Friday morning, we'll have one more episode of the show, and then we'll just kind of take the weekend as it comes. Thank you guys so much for listening, for supporting me in this podcast. It means a lot, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.